This is a photograph of a baby. Soft skin, small hands, the unmistakable face of an infant who has just been born. Except this photograph wasn't taken on the day she was born. It was taken when she was 16 years old. This is the true story of Brooke Greenberg, a girl whose body simply stopped growing at the age of 5 and never started again for the rest of her entire life. For 20 years, her mind, her bones, even her brain itself remained almost completely unchanged. And to this day, the most advanced genetic researchers on Earth still cannot fully explain why. Brooke Megan Greenberg was born on January 8, 1993 in Baltimore, Maryland, to parents Howard and Melanie Greenberg. She arrived a full month earlier than expected, weighing barely 4 pounds, after doctors noticed unusual irregular patterns in her growth while she was still in the womb. At birth, doctors also discovered her hips were dislocated, a condition that required immediate surgical correction. Aside from these early complications, Brooke initially appeared to be a fairly typical newborn baby. But within her first 6 years of life, Brooke would face a series of medical emergencies so severe and so strange that her family was repeatedly told to prepare for the worst. She underwent surgery for 7 perforated stomach ulcers, an extremely rare complication for someone so young. She suffered a sudden brain seizure, followed shortly afterward by what doctors believed was a stroke. Remarkably, weeks later, scans revealed no lasting brain damage at all, as if the stroke had simply never happened. At just 4 years old, Brooke fell into a deep, unexplained sleep that lasted an astonishing 14 consecutive days. During this period, doctors discovered what appeared to be a brain tumor, and her parents were told to prepare for their daughter's death. The family even purchased a small casket, fully believing they were about to lose her. Then, without warning, Brooke simply opened her eyes. The tumor doctors had identified was no longer there. Her father later described this moment to a reporter, recalling how the family had already begun saying their final goodbyes, only to receive an unexpected phone call informing them that something had changed. He said Brooke had a remarkable pattern throughout her life of overcoming nearly every single obstacle placed in front of her, often in ways that left her own doctors searching for an explanation they simply couldn't find. Somewhere between the ages of 4 and 5, Brooke's parents began noticing something even stranger than her medical emergencies. She had simply stopped growing entirely. Not slowed down, not delayed, completely stopped. Her parents initially assumed she would eventually catch up, the way some children experience temporary growth delays before a sudden developmental leap. So they brought her to nutritionists, hoping a dietary adjustment might help. Nothing changed. They brought her to endocrinologists, who attempted growth hormone treatments. Still, nothing changed. Brooke's father later explained that she didn't gain a single ounce and didn't grow a single inch, no matter what medical intervention they attempted. By the time Brooke reached 8 years old, she remained the exact size of a typical 6-month-old infant, weighing only 13 pounds. Doctors ran nearly every conceivable test: chromosomal analysis, genetic screening, hormone panels. Every single result came back completely normal, showing absolutely nothing that could explain what was happening to her body. Because there was no existing diagnosis that matched her condition, her own physician eventually gave it an unofficial, almost unsettling name: Syndrome X, an acknowledgement that medicine, quite simply, did not have an answer. As years continued passing, Brooke's case grew even more puzzling to researchers studying her condition. By the time she reached 16 years old, Brooke still had her original baby teeth, teeth that would typically have fallen out and been replaced more than a decade earlier. Her bone density and bone age were estimated to match that of a typical 10-year-old child. Yet her dental development specifically appeared to match an 8-year-old. Meanwhile, doctors estimated her brain had barely matured beyond the structure of a newborn infant, giving her a mental age of somewhere between 9 months and 1 year old. In other words, different systems throughout Brooke's body appeared to be aging at completely different, disconnected rates. Dr. Richard Walker, an endocrine physiologist who studied her case for years, explained that her body wasn't developing as one coordinated unit. Instead, it was behaving as though her organs and systems were entirely separate from one another, almost as if they belonged to different organisms entirely. Strangely, two specific parts of Brooke's body did continue growing normally throughout her entire life: her hair and her fingernails.
When researchers eventually sequenced her complete genome, hoping to finally uncover an answer, they ruled out every single genetic mutation associated with known premature aging disorders, including Werner syndrome and progeria. Her telomeres, the protective caps at the end of human chromosomes that typically shorten as people age, were measured and found to be shrinking at a completely normal, expected rate. In every measurable biological sense, parts of Brooke's body were aging exactly the way anyone else's would. And yet, somehow, her overall physical and cognitive development had simply frozen in place. This contradiction left researchers with a genuinely unsettling question. If the cells inside her body were following the normal rules of aging, something else, some signal or switch controlling overall development, had to be responsible for holding the rest of her body back. Dr. Walker would later say this discovery suggested that human growth and aging might not be a single unified biological process after all, but rather a collection of separate systems that simply happened to stay synchronized in almost everyone else on the planet. For years, Brooke Greenberg was believed to be the only documented case of her kind anywhere in the world. But researchers eventually discovered several other children experiencing remarkably similar, unexplained developmental patterns. A young girl in Oklahoma, another in New Mexico, another in Colorado. Each one chronologically years older than they appeared, frozen at vastly different physical and developmental ages than their actual birth certificates suggested. Scientists eventually grouped these rare cases together under the more formal term neotenic complex syndrome. When researchers studied blood samples from several of these children, they discovered something even more fascinating. At the cellular level, using a measurement called the epigenetic clock, their blood appeared to be aging at a completely normal, expected rate. This meant something remarkable. Whatever mechanism was freezing their visible growth and development was not affecting every single biological process within their bodies. Some invisible cellular layer of aging was continuing normally, even while their outward bodies remained suspended in childhood. To this day, researchers still don't fully understand what specific biological mechanism is responsible for this strange disconnect. Despite the bewildering nature of her condition, Brooke's family never treated her as a medical anomaly to be cured. Her father once explained that if a guaranteed pill existed to fix her condition, his first response would simply be that she wasn't broken to begin with. Brooke could recognize familiar sounds, respond to affection, and express simple emotional reactions even though she could never speak. She was raised surrounded by 3 sisters who treated her with consistent love throughout her entire 20-year life. On October 24, 2013, Brooke passed away at the same Baltimore hospital where she'd been born 2 decades earlier. The cause of death was bronchomalacia, a condition involving weakened cartilage in the airways that made breathing increasingly difficult. Even now, more than a decade after her death, researchers continue studying preserved samples of her genetic material. They remain hopeful that whatever mechanism froze Brooke's development in place might eventually offer new insight into the broader biological process of human aging itself. Brooke Greenberg lived for 20 full years, but for almost all of that time, her body remained exactly as it had been at the age of 5. No diagnosis ever fully explained why. No treatment ever managed to change it. Just a single unanswered question that science still cannot resolve. What actually controls the speed at which a human body is allowed to grow? If this story made you think, share it with someone who loves real, unexplained mysteries. And make sure you're subscribed, because next time we're uncovering another mystery science still struggles to fully explain.